Final hour overdrive continues. TSN 1050 on the TSN app, your home smart speaker up on TSN Plus. Bryan Hayes, O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill, Jamie Noodles McLennan. Later this hour, Best Bets brought to you by FanDuel on Jays Orioles tonight. Kevin Gausman on the mound for the Jays. The City Connect jerseys flying. You know, I saw some reports on that. Vladdy jerseys flying off the shelves, and Bo Bichette, Davis Schneider, who's been great. A couple of big hits over the weekend. You know, they're still under 500, but where would they be without Davis Schneider, without Danny Jansen? Saw Vladdy playing third base. They're trying to figure this out, man. They're trying to get it on the rails, but it's going to get tough now. You got Baltimore tonight, and the Orioles are still rocking. The Yankees are crushing teams. It's not going to be an easy ride. They've dug themselves a hole. But
what do you think they are, Hayes, if the pitching sorts itself out, Romano gets healthy, Vladdy, Bo start hitting, Springer comes to life? Like
500.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like,
yeah,
what,
probably
you
a 500
said back on the rails. What is it if it's back on the rails? It's a 500 team.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. You know, maybe they project as like an 85-win team, 86-win team. Maybe you get into September, and if you get hot, you're 3 or 4 games out of the wild card, and you got to jump 3 or 4 teams. You know, like that's probably the upside of the season right now is can you keep it together and play well enough where now you got to play over 500 ball the rest of the way in order for that to be a reality at any point. And they have not managed to do that at any point this season. You know, they just took 2 or 3 against the Pirates, but Pittsburgh's not that good. Sweep the Sox. White Sox are horrible. You know, you drop 3 or 4 against Detroit. Now it's the real stuff. You know, this is you got to beat. You're gonna have to beat Baltimore. You're gonna have to beat New York. You're gonna have to go on the road and beat good teams. You know, in their parks. So I don't have a lot of positivity around that take, but that's the truth. That's kind of where they are. As for the Cup Final, it has now been established. We have Edmonton against Florida starting Saturday night. Something to Chew On is brought to you by Boston Pizza, Canada's favorite sports bar. From tip-offs to tie bites and puck drops to pizza, BP's elite lineup of apps, wings, and ice-cold beers. Always dialed in for game time. Hustle in your local BP tonight. We've been asking people online, you know, it's early, but where do you lean here? Where are you at? And it's not surprisingly, it's very close. Panthers 57% of the vote, Oilers 43% of the vote in terms of who's going to win this series. Again, as we established it before, I would lean Florida by, like, if it's at Jerry's, it's like 53-47 type of thing. It's real close to a coin flip. I could be swayed on that. I think them being in the Cup Final, them having home ice, Bob versus Skinner, although Skinner was great. Skinner was great.
One thing, Hayes. Nobody's got any momentum waiting a week. That's
no, exactly. Sure. You're sitting around waiting. You're all going to be healthy and ready to play, right? You better be.
2 or
it's a Cup
3
Final.
days and then fire it up on Wednesday night. My God.
But even looking at it like the schedule, there is 2 days off in between some games. Now, I know it's a long trek. Listen, Edmonton to Florida is not, an hour and a half flight. But it just, like, I'd like to see this thing get moving. Like, it just, like momentum-wise, as far as from a fan base standpoint, like just
all around the league,
standpoint.
hockey fans in general, Jamie.
That's what it is, guys. Like both teams finish in 6. Even like if you could get them started on this Thursday, that now you just and have them play every second day. And I know Edmonton to Dallas wasn't a short flight, but you got the 2 days off in between. I get it, but this. It's going to be 3 weeks for 7 games, really. And, we'll see. I don't know if it lasts 7 games. I don't know. I can't predict. I thought Dallas was going to beat Edmonton just based on Dallas going through Colorado, going through Vegas. They looked like they were a buttoned-up team. Edmonton kind of sputtered, the Skinner story, all of that type of stuff. You weren't sure. Vancouver was kind of on a heater. They looked like a hell of a team too. So it just the storylines here through the playoffs. My bracket's broken. I had picked the Rangers and I had picked Colorado. So both of my teams are out. So
it's a similar situation here though, Noodles. Like you mentioned, who Dallas beat. Florida's saying the same thing, beating the Rangers, Boston, Tampa. I think we all knew Edmonton was going to mop the floor with LA. With all due respect to the Kings, they weren't putting up a fight, and they didn't. and Edmonton went through them pretty quickly. I thought Edmonton was going to beat up on Vancouver. That did not happen. Vancouver let it slip through their fingers. They had a 3-2 lead. They let it get away from them. They had some injuries by the end, and Edmonton did what they had to do to get through. This series, I think it was a very close series. I mean, it was, but Edmonton ultimately prevailed. I saw it the same way. Look at Dallas. They get the battle scars now. They've been through Colorado. They've been through Vegas. They're primed. It didn't mean anything, and it probably won't mean that much with Florida, who they've been through. I think it's more about who you are, what you've done, and how you're prepared and how you're built.
Yeah.
And I think, as we know, and we'll talk a lot about this throughout the week, the officiating is going to be a big part of this. You got Florida, who's the most penalized team in the league. Edmonton with a historically great power play. Are the refs going to call everything? Like that's the issue with saying it's Edmonton's game or Edmonton series. There's no guarantee the refs are going to call everything.
Florida's got to get a grasp on that immediately. Like they have to. I don't know if there's like a meeting with the coaches and the officials or supervisors, but if Florida wants to be in the box, they're going to pay a price for that when it gets that
playing
deep.
with fire.
You're toast.
There's just no
You can't
question.
beat Edmonton 4 times if it's lopsided. You're going to the box 5-6 times a night, and they're going 2 or 3. Like I don't see how Florida would win the series if that ends up being the case. But if it stays between the whistles and it's 5-on-5, Florida I think is going to be very comfortable in that situation. Here's Chris Johnston, our TSN hockey insider. How you feeling about this Cup final, CJ?
Pretty jazzed up, if I'm being honest. I think the idea of seeing Connor McDavid in games these big, seeing Florida get back there, I think that this one is gripping with different storylines and really two extremely deserving teams. And one way or another, we're going to get, either the first Cup in Panthers history or the first in Canada in over 30 years. So I kind of like the historical elements, and obviously I think the game should be great, and just hope it lives up to the billing, because I think the billing is being sold pretty strongly right now.
CJ, is there a narrative probably in some of the storylines you'd be talking about? Is McDavid going to be unstoppable? Like, I was in the building last night. I kind of felt that way, even though that, the shots on goal, the chances in that ended up being lopsided for Dallas, and Skinner was awesome. I just felt after that first goal, I was like, okay, I don't know if 97 is going to let this game get out of their grasp. Him being this close to a cup, is there going to be a storyline with that, saying 97 is just not going to let whatever Florida throws at him, he might find another level?
Well, it's certainly going to be probably the main thing we're watching. And, we've just never seen Connor McDavid even this close to a cup. They got swept in their previous trip to the conference final 2 years against Colorado. And so, I'm with you. I think even just watching it through the television last night, you did get the feeling that he's got this sort of I won't be denied kind of attitude. And, when you're in your 9th NHL season and you're getting your first crack at this, and, it's now a 32-team league, if you can do some basic math, even as great as Connor McDavid is, I think he understands there's just no guarantees that he'll get a chance as good as this one again. And, that's not a prediction by any means, but it's an understanding that, his focus will be and concentration will be at a level probably it's never been at before. And our focus on him will probably be as high collectively in the hockey world as it's ever been. And so I think that's a pretty special mix. And, I don't know who's going to ultimately win the series. I think what you guys were hitting on there is I got patched in is interesting in terms of, to what degree the Oilers' power play will be able to be a factor for them if they'll be given those opportunities. But, whether it's at 5-on-5 or on the power play, McDavid can win games on his own at times. And I think when you look at that series against Dallas, that's a big part of what happened in that series is, 5-on-5, there wasn't a lot between the teams in that series, but McDavid gave the Oilers an edge, and now they get a chance to play for the Cup.
In saying that, CJ, what do you think the mandate will be on the officiating? One thing everyone appreciates and loves about playoff hockey is they let the guys play. Special teams is such an important factor. We mentioned earlier in the show the top 2 penalty-killing teams are meeting in the finals. How do you think it'll be officiated?
I don't see a change. I don't think the officials themselves will be swayed by the fact that it's McDavid or any of the things we're talking about or Canadian market. I think that, it's probably going to be similar to what we've come to expect, where the officials won't want to be trying to be difference makers or deciders in these games. And so I think the standard will be, not as strict as it could be. It's probably the best way to put it. I could be wrong about that, but, even Chris Knobloch, the Oilers coach, just doesn't strike me as someone who will be like a lobbyer. He seems very patient, calm guy, not a big screamer at the bench. I think that, the game will be decided on the ice and that we won't see the officials get too involved unless, of course, things get a little bit crazy. And, the Panthers have a certain rep. Obviously, they like to play the game in the alley a little bit, but I just think with the stakes right now, you won't see any too much funny business because, it's pretty obvious. You don't need to be an NHL head coach to look at this matchup. And if you're looking at it from Florida's end, say, hey, we can't be taking too many penalties.
With Chris Johnston, our TSN hockey insider, who do you think? Obviously, the job isn't done. The Orioles need to win 4 more games to finally do this and be triumphant and win a cup. But who in the organization that has maybe taken a beating over the last couple of weeks, couple of months, couple of years, do you think is feeling the most vindicated today? Do you have anyone in particular, player, coach, management, owner, any choice in particular?
Well, it's tough to isolate just one. I mean, certainly Ken Holland's taken his knocks in his 5 years as a general manager there with not being able to build a team that was capable of this run. I mean, we've seen even in the last week or so, Darnell Nurse taken some pretty good hits. I mean, even Connor Brown this year had to endure a pretty difficult stretch without scoring a goal. And he's on the ice in the last minute when they're protecting that 1-goal lead last night. I would think from top to bottom, the organization feels a certain degree of vindication. I hope that they understand, though, that if you don't win the cup, you're not really remembered in the same way. I mean, I think that as much as this is a really cool thing to get there, I mean, I look back on that San Jose final. That team was so great for so long. They got to the one Stanley Cup and lost to Pittsburgh, and they're not remembered. It doesn't really sharpen their legacy. They're remembered as a great team that couldn't get the job done. And so, this is a huge opportunity in the hands of the Oilers to really, I guess, for any of their detractors over the years to really shove it to them. And obviously just the drive to actually win the thing. I mean, it's so hard in this world, in the salary cap era, with questions about contracts coming in the near future. I mean, this is what you dream of, and they got a chance to actually do it now.
If they do, if the Oilers end up winning, does that end the narrative surrounding Canadian teams and how tough it is to win up here, and how could you compete with a team in Florida or in Vegas or in Texas? Like, are the Oilers 4 wins away from ending all of the complaints from people in Canada?
I think they are, and I hope they are too. I mean, I think it's got a little nutty, and you look at it, builds over 30 years, and we've seen a number of teams go to the final in that period of time and not be able to get it done for one reason or another. So I get why it takes on, a certain life of its own with some of those conversations. But, the truth is it's not easy to win anywhere. If anything, if I wanted to paint with a really broad stroke, I might say the one thing the Canadian teams have had is it's an advantage, but it works against them, is the fact that they just, have such passionate fan bases. Maybe hasn't been the same pressure, the same degree of pressure to put a winner on the ice each and every year, because they know that, let's face it, the Scotiabank Arena is going to be full next year for the Leafs, no matter what the season looks like, no matter, the results of the previous season. And I think that is something that maybe over time has it's obviously a benefit to the people that own the teams, but might have worked against them in terms of their desires to win. Whereas I went to a lot of games in Florida over the years where there was no one in the building. I mean, it's a rocking, awesome place now, but they've had to build that thing up and become a very competitive team, make a lot of good decisions as an organization to get to this point where they're profitable and, they're in this spot to win a cup. So, I think it should end it if Edmonton gets the job done. And honestly, I see a lot of the sort of no state income tax bouncing around on the weekend on social media. I mean, I just think some of that stuff is excuses. At the end of the day, it really is not easy for anyone to become a winner, and it's been particularly hard for the Canadian teams because they haven't been managed well enough.
Yeah, well, that's
CJ,
exactly
how many
it.
people?
Go ahead, Noodles.
Yeah, sorry. I was saying, CJ, how many people have complained about the schedule to you?
Not that many, actually. I mean, I see it certainly sort of from fans, but from people inside the game, I haven't heard it as much. And anyone I know that's going to be traveling the series probably doesn't mind having the extra travel day. But I get from a fan standpoint, you like the rhythm of every other night. I don't think anything beats that. You basically have one night where you have all the emotion of the game, you get a day to recover and take care of the stuff around the house, and then you're back at it the next night. But I think this is just a practical thing. It's better for the athletes, and it makes it easier for those covering the series. And maybe unfortunately the fans just are going to have to suck it up and potentially watch hockey all the way to June 24th, which is pretty crazy to think about.
With Chris Johnston, what are you hearing on Tyler Bertuzzi and the Leafs and where that might be going?
I don't have any indication that it's going to end up necessarily with a contract, but certainly, it sounds like they're at least started to explore what that might look like. And this is an interesting time, not just with Bertuzzi and the Leafs, but a lot of teams who like a free agent, where you're kind of doing this dance, because if you're in Tyler Bertuzzi's shoes, you're this close to July 1st. You played on a one-year deal this year. The season was what it was. And so I think you're constantly weighing, is it best to take a deal, or is it better to get to the market and take a peek at what's out there? And so I think a lot of teams sort of, even with the free agents, the pending free agents that they like, are dealing with that. Even the teams are doing the same thing. The Leafs are looking at, okay, Bertuzzi's going to cost us X. What else might be out there on the market? Is there a better fit on July 1st? And so I think that this tends to be a time where it's a little bit of a dance back and forth. And I think, that's where the Leafs are with Bertuzzi's cap. But, certainly wouldn't surprise me to see him return to the team and get a deal done. But I don't have any reason to believe that that's imminent or in the air right now.
Yeah. It's interesting because, you got the Cup Final going on. We saw a trade a week and a half ago with McDonough being dealt back to Tampa, and the 30 other teams in the league can still operate. They likely won't while the Cup Final's going on. But, we've been saying this, CJ, that in the next month to, maybe month and a half, like all these teams, the Maple Leafs included, are going to show their hand for the most part, in terms of what they're planning on doing. And, Bertuzzi's one piece, Max Domi's a piece. There's a number of other guys who are up for contracts that the Leafs will figure out. Some they have to figure out by July 1st. Others they can wait until later in the summer. But, like the big chess moves, the core four being broken up, everyone's talking about it. Like, do you expect to have an answer on that by the draft, by July 1st? Like, when will the Leafs or the players involved show their hands here?
Tell us.
I think by the draft, it doesn't mean that any decisions will be made, but I think we'll have a way better sense of the direction it's headed. And, let's face it, this summer for the Leafs, I think, is about, doing some things on the blue line. They've got to find another goaltender to play with Joseph Woll. I think when you look at the forwards, obviously we could be talking about a massive trade that may shift some of the thinking here, but whether it's Bertuzzi or anywhere else, I just think they only have so much to spend up front. But, I don't think we're going to get really a lot of clarity until close to the end of the month. And I would say that for most teams out there. It's not a complete news moratorium where teams aren't allowed to do anything during the Cup Final, but typically you don't get a lot of sort of trades or roster type of decisions during this window. And, as I said, if it goes to Game 7, the Cup Final is going to be decided, 4 nights before the draft. And so it's going to be a pretty wild last week of June, I would think. And, by that point in time, I think we'll start to get a better feel for exactly where things are going with the Leafs. And, a lot of the teams are competing against to try to get to where the Oilers and Panthers are today and be on a long playoff run next spring.
Yeah. All right, CJ. We got a few days to gear up for Game 1 of the Cup Final. Take advantage of that, and we'll do it again soon. Thank you, buddy.
All right, boys. Have a good week.
Chris Johnston, our TSN hockey insider. There's some noise out there. Bertuzzi, I guess, I'm sure Domi. Every team's talking to their respective UFAs. There's RFAs you got to figure out. Yeah.
Would you want them both back?
I just don't. On a one-year deal, maybe.
Not going to be one-year deals, though. I think both of them would be wanting some security.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
just come off of one-year deals, right?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know.
You just have to toss it out there, guys. It's like if you want to come back, this is all we can do. If you're looking for that 5 or 6 year deal,
can't do that. Can't go long term. I don't think with either guy. They're in their late 20s. They're not main pieces. They're good players. I think the organization wants some consistency. There's always turnover beyond, the core 5 guys.
But you did mention, Hayes, they are good players, so if they're not coming back, there better be a plan B. And general managers, everyone in hockey always thinks that 6 months, a year down the road, 5 years down the road, if it's not going to be them, there's got to be plan B, and it's got to be as good or better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're good players. Like, I'm not adverse to them. I wouldn't be adverse to them coming back. I think if they are looking for 5, 6 years, I just don't know how comfortable you can be with that. For wingers and depth guys, that's a lot.
I mean, Bertuzzi brings a unique dynamic, but I would ask you, like, watching him, he'd be 29 right now, and he'd be a 30-year-old player in February next year. Like, is his pace like? Is that something that would be concerning on a long-term deal?
I think so. I mean, that's the thing. Domi's a great skater. Like, Domi can skate, and I think that will continue. I think he'd be more prone to the idea of sticking around on a shorter-term deal, possibly because of his connection to the team. He's used to jumping around. That's what he's done. He probably wants that to come to an end. But, again, we'll know those guys by July 1 will have an answer, more than likely, right? And probably by the draft, it'll start to leak out, like, not looking like we're going to get something done here, so – they're going to market. In other words, we don't have an answer, or we're not giving them the money they're looking for, and they're free to go and check out what else is out there. On top of that, you got RFAs. Like, I think they can sign Matthew Nyes to an extension this summer. Like, he'll be an RFA after next year, but do you get out in front of that? Try to sign him long-term at a lower cap hit? Expect him to keep growing? Like, they've been against that in the past. Doing that. They did it with the big guys, but, you look back on it now, do they wish they got Zach Hyman on an 8-year deal at $4 million?
Probably so.
Probably.
I would think so. But, I think of the Ottawa, like, Drake Batherson is 6 years at 4-something. Now, Batherson's a 60-point guy. I don't know if now he's 25, so if Nyes can maybe get to that, like, maybe that is something. I don't know. Like, it depends on what the number looks like.
Yeah. I'm sure they'll be discussing all that stuff without question. All right, Brad Faxon coming up to put a wrap on the RBC Canadian Open. Start looking ahead to a few really busy weeks in the golf world as well. The Memorial next week, U.S. Open the week after down at Pinehurst, number 2. So we'll get to that with Fax. We got our best bet still to come as well. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. Overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line of the final score. Best bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. Jays Orioles tonight. Kevin Gausman on the mound, and we'll get to that game. We've got Brad Faxon coming up here in a moment. Get his take on the RBC Canadian Open, his take on Robert MacIntyre pulling it out, and then pulling the chute on Jack Nicklaus in the Memorial and heading home to party for a week.
Well, we don't know that.
No, we don't know, but he did say that. He's like, I'm going home. I want to get home and have a great time. Like,
but his agent's got to be in his ear saying, you go home and have your fun for 24 hours and you get your ass back to Dublin, Ohio.
But even that, dude, like, you can't fly to Scotland and back and
tell your buddies, fly your buddies. You just won $2 million or something. Tell your buddies to meet you in Ohio.
That's the move.
Yeah.
Yes.
Meet you in Chicago. Say, we're doing up Chicago. Get here Monday night, hit Wrigleyville, floor it downtown, handshake with Jack Nicklaus Tuesday morning, and you move on. Dude,
I guess when you're from Scotland, man, and the kid's been homesick, it's been documented. He just wanted to get home and see his buddies. But I get that. But if I'm representing him, I'm like, you go ahead and do that. But you better be on the first tee to shake Jack Nicklaus's hand on Thursday.
I agree, man. There's so much money, prestige, FedEx Cup points, like everything on the line.
And there's no cut.
Exactly. I mean, you're you just play like you did this weekend. You're not going to win the tournament likely, but you could T10 it and make a fortune.
Yeah,
a fortune. But the Scotsman, man, he's a different breed. He's like, I'm out of here. Dougie McIntyre, his dad, on the plane.
I find it crazy. All those guys are working towards that one opportunity to get in those elevated events, and he gets there and he just says, I'm not playing the first one.
I know.
Yeah,
it was great. It was a great post-game interview, and I referenced this clip. I found it. You guys want to hear this? Where I'm assuming it's an American journalist over there trying to get to the bottom of the Glasgow accent, the Scottish accent. All right, let's play it.
Scottish accent is famous for being difficult to understand, but the Glaswegian accent can be even more difficult. There are words and phrases in Glasgow that sound a bit like a foreign language even, so I'm on a mission to find some people to help me translate. Okay, so I love the Glaswegian accent, and I was wondering if you could teach me some local phrases.
Look at this
Well,
guy.
it's very hard to bring them to mind. This is the thing. It's all right when your eyes are not going and happy eyes. You understand?
The Scottish accent is...
So the guy just starts speaking gibberish, and she's like, "What? Pardon?" And he's like,
Yeah.
"You got to see the longer version's hysterical."
He
Like,
delivered what she was looking for, and then she was like, I have no idea what the hell you just said.
You're supposed to help me understand you. You can't just start speaking in Glaswegian and throwing sayings out and phrases that I have no idea what they mean or how they sound. But it's such a great clip. You see that stuff. The internet wins a lot of times. You get clips like that, you
Yeah.
find them, you got to bookmark that kind of stuff. But, yeah, Bob McIntyre, Dougie McIntyre, his girlfriend, they're on their way back home. So turn the page, but
you go to
it was a great week.
Yeah, you go to stereotypical Scotland. Like I think I told you, I went over and walked Turnberry with the Pronger, and we had some drinks afterwards in the cigar bar. And we almost got in a fight that these local guys challenged us. We sat there and drank with them, hung out, and then at the end of the night they wanted to fight. And one guy stood up. He was like 5 feet tall. And I was like, oh, my God, this guy's going to get stuffed in a garbage can because he was challenging prongs. It was the most ridiculous thing.
That's
Yeah.
a standard
And
night, though.
nice
Like,
guy.
you
Yeah.
get in a fight at the end of the night.
Yeah,
Why not?
exactly. The Glasgow kiss, man.
It
Just a
was hilarious.
Scottish kiss, just
Yeah, it was
a
hilarious.
headbutt right in the nose. It's such a great thing.
Scottish kiss.
Brad Faxon will join us here in a moment, but Hamilton held up incredibly well. It was raining a bit yesterday, but course looked incredible, played incredible. I know a lot of the players were talking it up. Corey Connors was saying one of his favorite places on tour. It was just a great setup, great party, cool concerts, great food, great vibe. Everyone got along. It was what you're looking for at the RBC Canadian Open, and Robert MacIntyre ends up winning. To chat about it, we're joined now by longtime tour member himself. He works now with NBC, the Golf Channel. Here's Brad Faxon. How you doing, Fax?
Good. How are you guys?
We're doing well. We're still recovering from a long week. We were up there in Hamilton all week, and course was great, and Robert MacIntyre ends up taking it home. I mean, he was a Ryder Cup guy. He's a good player. He's a lefty. What do you make of the story, Robert MacIntyre finding a way to win on the PGA Tour?
Well, there were so many great storylines yesterday, all week, but yesterday in particular. MacIntyre, like you said, was a first-time Ryder Cupper for the European team, the victorious team in Rome and Italy. A guy that had kind of struggled earlier in this year, not really playing that well, found some of his game last couple of weeks. You had another sort of unknown guy, Ben Griffin, who's getting better every week. The Frenchman, Victor Perez, who now pretty much will lock his spot on the team in the Olympics in Paris in just a few months. And then Rory McIlroy and kind of his mentor. He's the mentor for Tom Kim. They both shoot 64. Rory defending his championship on what Corey Connors says is his favorite tournament, I'm sure. But I don't know if you can find a better golf course on the PGA Tour than Hamilton.
Yeah, it's a great spot,
It was pretty
man.
good, Fax. Fax, you got to explain this to me. So if I'm the representative of Robert MacIntyre, the goal for all these guys that are kind of tweeners or looking to achieve something is to get on these elevated events. This guy gets into an elevated event and then pulls the pin on the Memorial. Like, if you were his agent, what would you be saying to him?
You know, I'd be disappointed. And I understand the emotion that goes through winning and then what comes with that. And Jack Nicklaus is your host.
Yes.
Number one, in a signature event that not only will bring you a lot of money just to show up, but potentially places in history. I would have definitely had a conversation with him about reconsidering that. I know it gets him into the U.S. Open, but it also, you have an obligation. And when you are one of the top players in the world, you have to face the scrutiny that comes with it for decisions like that. Now, I haven't heard that until you just told it to me, but if he's just pulled out of the Memorial, I can't believe it. He could go there, finish last place, have the best milkshakes on tour, and get ready for the U.S. Open.
Yeah, and yet he basically said it right after the round. Like, he was chatting with Amanda, CBS, like, immediately and said, no, I don't think I'm going. Like, it really didn't take him long. It's almost as if he woke up with a 4-shot lead and said, if I close this, I'm on the next flight to Scotland. Like, I'm out of here. Which,
no, that's crazy. You know, when you
crazy.
grow up as an American, you know, and I hate to say it, but Bob MacIntyre probably never saw Jack Nicklaus play in a tournament. He certainly would know who Jack is. But, you know, when you have that chance to play in one of the biggest tournaments on tour, a signature event hosted by the greatest player that's ever played the game, you don't say no.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's pretty wild, but I guess he has. You know, there were a number of stories like you referenced. The biggest one up here is McIlroy. You know him well personally, working with him, being a friend of his. He is a different beast. We talked about him consistently last week. We had kind of, I wouldn't say VIP access, but where our studio was right off the 11th tee. And if you're familiar with Hamilton like you are, Fax, that's the toughest hole in the course. It's a really it's not a dogleg left, but it's a tough drive over this big tree, and you got to put yourself in position. And we were watching some guys leave themselves 215 out, 220 out, and a beast uphill, false front. This guy was launching golf balls and leaving himself like a flip wedge out. It's just remarkable to watch him hit a golf ball. And, you know, he said after the tournament he loves the Canadian Open, and he's going to keep coming until they tell him he can't anymore. How significant is that for the RBC Canadian Open to have basically an ambassador in McIlroy who's not Canadian continue to commit to their tournament?
Yeah, really an unpaid ambassador, right? He's not like one of the ambassadors like Taylor Pendrith or Corey Connors or Mackenzie Hughes. I mean, you have several others, too, like Sahith Theegala, who's a star in the making. You've got a great group up there. And Rory, you know, I know that he's won 2 of the last, 6 or 7 events there. He will love the TPC of Toronto next year because it's a big course. He can drive it as far as he wants to out there. I know there'll be heavy rough, but when he gets out there and he gets that driver motoring like he had it this week, he had some great numbers statistically all week long, both off the tee. And we've seen him dominate off tee and to the greens, and he also had a phenomenal putting week this week.
Fax, you ever watch that driver up close and just, I mean, thinking about him driving the golf ball like that at Augusta National, it's hard to fathom not having a victory there because it's scary. You blow it out there 350 with a draw on it or whatever you want. It's like DeChambeau kind of jokingly said he can turn it into a 68 par, but McIlroy literally can do that if he's driving it well. You just wonder how he just doesn't dominate that tournament or majors in general.
Well, I have sat behind him, and you just kind of sit there and shake your head because a lot of times when he swings, it just looks like he's not trying to hit it far. And I think, you know, he's just turned 35. He's, 5'9". He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's extremely fit, strong. And he switched this year to a little bit longer shaft. He went back to a 45.5 shaft, and he had used a 44-inch shaft last year and led driving distance by 5 yards. So now he's got a club where he's hit, a mark of 190 miles an hour ball speed, and he can carry it routinely 325 yards.
Yeah, it's incredible. The Memorial, obviously a big one. Scheffler, all the big boys will be there. Then they roll it into Pinehurst. How did you historically feel about, playing week to week to week, Travelers right after? Like, it's a 3 or 4 week grind for these guys. Do you see Scheffler? I'm sure he's definitely at the Memorial. He'll be at the Open. I would assume he'll be at the Travelers. Like, do you see him just picking up kind of where he left off and continuing to be the man, or do you think there's other guys that are gunning for Scheffler at this point?
Well, at the PGA Championship, that was a big week for Xander Schauffele to close it out the way he did, birding the last hole to beat Shambo when he had been on a 2-week winless streak, but knocking on the door all the time. And he has the all-around game that Scottie Scheffler has, really doesn't have a weakness. And sometimes it's that mental hurdle where you have to just prove it to yourself that you can do it. It's going to be interesting to watch the differences in the golf courses these 3 or 4 weeks in a row to see what these players have to see when they play Hamilton. Then they go to Muirfield Village, which is typically a very long and demanding course into the greens. Jack Nicklaus likes to make, kind of angled greens, premium on iron play, where if you don't hit it in the fairway, it's almost impossible to get it on the greens. And then Pinehurst is something like players never see this. A course that has no rough. It has this kind of natural waste area, and you need a lot of luck to be able to have a clean shot out of that waste area. But these greens that Donald Ross built, over 100 years ago, they're up in the air. They're sloped every different direction. So if you're not precise, you have to be a great iron player. And even players like Schauffele and Scottie Scheffler that are great iron players, Rory, like he played last week. If you're not hitting it precisely with your irons, you're going to have some of the most difficult up and downs, and there's going to be a lot of choice for these players, whether to chip, run a ball up there, lob it up there, or even try and putt from way off the greens.
Yeah, it sets up for a great couple of weeks. We talked about Scheffler. You mentioned Schauffele. Obviously, Rory. This live coexistence has been around now for a couple of years. We've talked to you a lot about it over the last couple of years. Have you reached a point now where you're going into the majors and you've changed the way you evaluate live players? In other words, maybe 2 years ago you thought, they'll be rusty, they can't do it, but your mind's changed considering what Koepka's done in the past and other players, DeChambeau. Like, these guys seem to have 2 or 3 guys competing every single major.
Well, there's no doubt about it that, you have some players there that can still win on a consistent basis that are young enough. Someone like Cam Smith as well. I wouldn't count Dustin Johnson out. But, these players that went to live, they got upfront money, which has never been done before. And I don't know if that takes the edge off, where you might not wake up as early or practice as long as you would have. You're playing sparingly over the year. You're not playing, Rory might play 25 or so weeks a year. And now you're playing, is there 18 events on the Live Tour, 15 events on the Live Tour. Maybe you're not as sharp. You can't build up a schedule like you mentioned 3 or 4 weeks in a row. Most of the top players don't play more than 3 weeks in a row. If they do play 4, they have the luxury now of flying privately. I know, like Rory could have flown home last night from Toronto down here to Jupiter, Florida, where he'll, head back up tomorrow or even maybe Wednesday morning, depending on his pro-am or depending on how he feels. He knows the golf course well. I don't like what happened with Liv, but I do want to see the best players in the world play together. And I think the big fight now, and I can say this with some certainty, on the Players Policy Board, there are several players, Patrick Cantley, even Tiger, who's not playing anymore, think that the PGA Tour can go ahead forward without an agreement, without a merge, and that those players shouldn't be allowed back. I think Rory's kind of taken the opposite side of that and said, look, we lost. Let's just get them together. And, this is bad for golf. Nobody likes talking about this going on where all these professional athletes are making so much money and our ratings are down on the PGA Tour. Nobody watches the Live Tour. Those ratings are almost non-existent. And I think the players on the Live Tour that really want to play against the best would do anything to get back there.
Well, we'll see what comes of it this week, where it's exclusively PGA down at the Memorial, but then everyone comes together again at Pinehurst for the U.S. Open just over a week. It's going to be a blast. Enjoy it. We love watching you. We love having you on, and we'll do it again down the road. Thank you, Brad.
Well, thank you. I'll be there in that booth at NBC talking about everything. Can't wait.
Yep, it'll be a blast. There he is, Brad Faxon of NBC and the Golf Channel. And Fax loves Hamilton, man. Shout out to Hamilton Golf and Country Club as well.
Fax
loves
also jacked up about TPC Toronto next year. I love that.
As he should be. Yeah, great place, great spot. I haven't played the North course, which will be the championship course, I guess you'd want to call it that, since they've done
Me and you played it together.
I didn't finish my thoughts. Since they made the renovations, we played it 3 or 4 years ago. They haven't completely turned it over, but they've added a lot for the Canadian Open. So they
I think
pushed.
you shot 78 the day I played with you, Hazy.
I did. I played outstanding that day.
Wow.
I did. I was a wizard.
I knew you remember that.
I remember it vividly. I haven't broken 80 a lot in my life, but when I do, I remember it.
Yeah, you were pretty fired up about that.
Yeah, I was dialed. I might have been 76, actually. You might be shortchanging me. But neither here nor there. It's all good. Who needs those details? They're irrelevant at this point.
I'm sorry if it was actually 76.
Yeah, it might have been. All right, we'll come back with our best bets. Brought to you by FanDuel. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN Plus. All right, today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. I got to go with the Orioles tonight. You're paying barely any juice, minus 112 on FanDuel. Gosman's on the mound. I understand that. Gosman's got a great history against Baltimore. He's pitching better recently. The Jays are coming off a good series. But Baltimore is Baltimore. They're a better team. The Jays, they snuck out 2 out of 3 against Pittsburgh. I'll believe it when I see it that they're really starting around the corner, and it's just about value here. You're minus 112, Baltimore, Toronto. You got to lay the Orioles money line. So I'm on Orioles money line tonight. Today's best bets powered by FanDuel. The first inning means as much as the ninth when you bet baseball in the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Please play responsibly. Must be 19 plus. Physically located in Ontario.
What a turnaround for those Orioles, Hayes. Remember how trash they were? Oh my God.
Yeah, they were the worst team
yes.
in baseball and in pro sports. They had a season where I'm pretty sure they won like 45 games or it was something scary, dude. How bad
that was like 4 years ago, wasn't it? When was that?
Yeah. They bottomed out, and they really bottomed out. And then the owners sold. They got new ownership. They drafted, developed, traded for the right pieces, signed the right pieces when need be. Now they got a bit more budget, and it's go time, man. It looks like they're in the wheelhouse here for a while.
And even when they were trash, they would still kick Toronto in the junk in a must-win game coming down the stretch where the Jays were. Remember, they would just be, they're going into Baltimore, they're going to win those games, and the Orioles would play their asses off, and it would be like, come on, man.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I remember a couple of years ago, they were a 500 club, kind of out of nowhere. Like no one saw that. Everyone knew they were young, and it was probably going to hit at some point. And then they had that one quality year, 500 year, and then you had 2 options there, fork in the road, right? It's either, okay, do you bounce back to reality and you're brutal again, or do you say, no, that was actually, a stepstone to a positive future, and it turns out now we know the answer to that. Mm-hmm. Last year they won 100 games. This year they might win 100 games. They're a really good team, man. Really good team. So won't be easy tonight. Will not be easy tonight for the Blue Jays. But Jays-Orioles tonight. Got the NBA Finals beginning on Thursday. So same thing over there. The Celtics haven't played in like 2 weeks. They'll go Thursday night, Boston, Denver, and then you got Edmonton, Florida. So it sets up really well. A lot of star power on all 4 teams represented well in terms of the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Final.
Did you just say the Celtics haven't played? How long have they? When is the last time they played?
Swept Indiana. They haven't played in a week, probably.
Yeah.
When did they? Last Wednesday or Thursday they beat Indiana.
That's
like
a full training camp for the coach to detail out how they're going to get ready to play again.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Really crazy.
It is ridiculous.
And same thing with Dallas. They beat Minnie in 5. They're both teams, all 4 teams. Dallas, Boston, Edmonton, Florida. There's no excuses for not being ready.
No.
You're going to be healthy. You're going to be prepared. Who's got it? We'll find out.
I'd rather let's see it. Let's get it going here instead of waiting. That's the thing.
I hear you. I hear you, but doesn't matter what we want. It's not going to happen.
That's true.
It's not going to happen. All right. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for helping out. We appreciate it. Everyone for tuning in today. TV, radio, podcast, web. We appreciate that. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at
Bobby Mack. Get to Dublin and shake Jack's hand on the first tee, 4 p.m.
We'll chat then.